Hello, class. I wanted to review your chapter 9 and 10 reporting writing project with a few example articles from the internet. So first of all, this is going to be different from your web writing format. This is considered traditional news writing. So we're looking at that expanded inverted pyramid or trapezoid style. That's something a little closer to what you did for your reporting writing project. You're going to write more in the past tense. However, you are still looking to move the story forward. So you're generally speaking going to lead with whatever your latest development is in a story compared to maybe if you were doing a top 10 list or something else. Let's take a look first at this article from AP News so you can get a better idea. Okay, so in this article from AP News, this was published in 2021. They're talking about the US reopening to international travel and allowing people to see their loved ones, some of whom hadn't seen each other since 2019 or maybe even before. Now, instead of just leading with the US reopens to international travel, which is in their headline, they start with parents held children born while they were stuck abroad, long separated couples kissed, and grandparents embraced grandchildren who had doubled in age. And then they move into the US fully reopened to many vaccinated international travelers Monday. So instead of leading with the initial, main idea of the US fully reopened and when did it reopen? It reopened on Monday. To whom? To international travelers. What happened because of it? People were able to reunite with loved ones. Instead of starting with that part, they're painting a picture for the audience by describing what was seen in airports and in other places across the country. And in that way, they're able to draw the reader in a little more, and it provides a little more of a human element for the story. Instead of it being cut and dry, they're leading with the idea of what does this mean to their audience? And after they have this kind of lead in and then their actual lead, they continue with information related to a specific person who was able to enter the US for the first time in, quite a while to see his mother-in-law. So they introduced the person they interviewed and then continue with a brief quote from him. So they say, it's a big feeling, said Alvarez, 43, who lives in Ensenada, Mexico, a 2-hour drive from San Diego. And prior to the pandemic, his family would visit California twice a month. So it was, and how did it affect him? Well, it was a very high emotional cost, which is something a lot of people have said related to the to all of the restrictions from the pandemic. So we're going from this broader introduction to a specific case, and then moving into, again, how this is affecting the general public who are probably reading this story. And then from this human element here, so someone who is affected by it, they go into another person affected, but in this case, it's someone with Customs and Border Protection in a different part of the country. Now, obviously, I don't expect you guys to go around the country looking for people, but this is an example of how you can take both a a regular kind of personal element and add it in to your stories, as well as adding the professional element, the professional's opinion or their perspective on whatever you're covering. And as you can see, it's broken down into, one or two sentence paragraphs. And they do continue with additional interviews. Now, in your case, what you want to focus on is having these larger direct quotes. I want to see at least one from each of your interviews. You can, of course, paraphrase additional information, or if you want to include more than one direct quote, you can. But overall, you want to avoid having these types of really short quotes. A lot of times when you take very short quotes out of context, it kind of diminishes the either the impact, or maybe you're more likely to accidentally misrepresent what someone said. So the best idea is either to paraphrase something or to provide a full direct quote. Okay, and one more quick thing. As you saw, there were not any subheadings for this. They just had those 1 to 3 sentence paragraphs and broke down the information accordingly. Now, with the expanded inverted pyramid, you're looking at the beginning, which is usually your lead. It'll also provide your story framework. Your bridge is going to transition, address any immediate W's and H that were not explained at the beginning of your story. You're also going to probably include some kind of direct quote to help transition between the beginning and the middle sections. You'll continue to expand the story and identify key points of information using direct quotes and other sources. And you also want to add any additional necessary information. When you're ending your story, most of the time you're looking forward, you're looking for some kind of call to action, maybe explain what is going to happen next related to the story. You could also use an encapsulating quote if there isn't really a next item. So maybe an additional quote from someone you mentioned at the beginning, more of their perspective, how they feel about this topic. And when you're organizing, one way you can go back and see if you're heading in the right direction is stop for a second, put your writing down, and then come back to it and read it one time through and say, okay, does this make sense? And is the main point getting across? Now, the main point should be something that you have in your leads, because your lead is going to contain key elements for your entire story. So you're looking to make sure that you're still following that main point. If you realize that maybe you picked the wrong one when you started writing, make a copy of your document and see if you can rewrite it, if you can rework the information so it'll make a little more sense. And that way, if you decide that it doesn't in your new version, you'll still have the old one on hand, and it'll help you figure out how to rewrite something and make it a little better each time. And also, of course, when you're looking at the main point, you want to make sure it's a main point that is important to your readers. And when will they see it? You want to figure out, like, okay, when are they going to see it? What's the timing for this? Are they going to look at this after a meeting's already taken place? Are they looking at it before the final meeting for a project happens? Let's look at these additional examples. Okay. So in this article from the Advertiser, they're talking about the Lafayette millage renewal on November 13th of last year. They were talking about how these different property taxes would affect the local economy, the plans for our airport expansion, and for other services in our area. So not only are they saying like, okay, so 4 Lafayette Parish property taxes are up for vote in the November 13 election, and stakes are high not only for the government services they fund, but for the cadre of local political leaders who've endorsed them. Voters will consider 4 parish-wide ballot proposals to renew or rededicate existing property taxes, as well as 4 state constitutional amendments. So they're talking, they also include the other items on the ballot, but in general, they want to show the people of Lafayette Parish what is on the ballot and how it will potentially impact their lives. And so they say, they explain, of course, one of the biggest questions people always have when tax renewals are on a ballot, or any kind of taxes really. They'll say either this is going to increase something, or it's going to keep it the same. So in this case, it's none of the local proposals stand to increase taxes, only renew existing taxes at their current rates. And then they continue by talking about how, which proposals are on there, how they will affect people in Lafayette Parish. And they break it down. In this case, it's more of a list kind of format. So they start by saying that everyone's been talking about these 2 property taxes in particular. And they start with the Lafayette Parish Library one and have a few paragraphs devoted to it, in addition to part of an interview with a councilman. And then they talk about the regional airport mill tax and have a few paragraphs explaining what it is and where the money's going. And then they explain a couple of other property taxes briefly, but of course they're focusing on the ones people said they were most interested in. Sorry. So yeah, so after they talk about all of the property taxes, they continue by discussing government operations and how this is a political test for our mayor president. And then they continue by talking about the council person they interviewed earlier, Carlson. And as you can see, when they first mention people in here, they use their title, first name, last name. And same thing with Carlson. They said Councilman Josh Carlson, then went to Carlson on his later mention. So make sure that you have the correct title for someone, and also that you, whenever you mention adults later in your work, that you are referring to them by their last name. They probably will not have a title associated with them on later mentions. Usually that's going to be for someone who's, let's say, the president or a pope or something like that, you know, someone who's pretty high up in the food chain. And so they continue discussing some of the other ballot items, etc. And then have a final paragraph related to the millage renewals. All right, now let's look at the current. So you can see this October article is about the community design process, closing for the I-49 connector. And they do include a note here. Now, I would assume, of course, since you guys are turning in this article for our class, that you are going to have all of your information in here. You wouldn't have any editor's notes related to updates. And in this case, Mader begins his article by talking about some of the last choices for the revised design of the I-49 connector. And then he gives a very brief background related to the project in the second part, explaining that there have been design meetings for the past 18 months. And then beginning Monday, the project planners will hold several neighborhood meetings. Obviously, this is from the past, so it already happened. But whenever you're writing an article, this is a way you can see when are people going to view your article. Well, of course, this one includes a date in it as well. This is part of whenever you're publishing online, you want to make sure you're including those publication dates. So people understand when you say Monday, you don't mean this Monday, you mean whatever Monday when you publish this. But so he says, beginning Monday, project planners will hold several neighborhood meetings at the Lafayette Science Museum, culminating in an open house that will put the freeways components on display. And then he goes on to elaborate about the project and includes some information, direct quotes from the DOTD project manager. And then he explains also like some of the other ideas related to the project. And about how much they are going to spend on this project, as well as, of course, the pictures they had related to it, showing some of the options available and what they're considering. So take a look at those, see how people organize their information, and you can see, kind of get an idea, read through some other articles, and you'll understand sort of how to include direct quotes, how to make your introductions a little more interesting, and it'll help you in the long run whenever you're writing either traditional news articles like this or possibly web articles in the future.